It was one of those relationships that felt like everything was falling into place, the kind where trust comes easy and love feels like a gentle, reassuring presence in your life. We had been together for a while now, and looking back, it was hard to pinpoint exactly when things began to feel so perfect. Every conversation felt meaningful, every touch felt electric, and every glance shared between us seemed to speak volumes. I believed we had something real, something solid. He was everything I thought I wanted. Funny, charming, thoughtful. He made me feel seen in ways that no one else had. There was this undeniable chemistry between us, an unspoken connection that seemed unbreakable. I trusted him completely, and for the most part, he trusted me too. At least, that's what I thought. But when something begins to feel perfect, sometimes it's easy to overlook the small cracks forming beneath the surface. Have you ever been in a relationship where everything felt perfect until it wasn't? Where those small, subtle changes start to shift everything, and suddenly you find yourself questioning things you never thought you would. At first, I never suspected anything. How could I? He was kind, always there when I needed him, always attentive to my needs. But little things began to change, and it wasn't obvious at first. It was as if the warmth we had shared started to dim. His texts became shorter. He would spend more time on his phone even when we were together. And he started spending more time away from home. I wasn't sure what to make of it at first. Maybe it was work. Maybe he just needed some space. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but as much as I tried to push the thoughts away, there was this feeling, a quiet, gnawing feeling, that something wasn't right. At the time, I brushed it off. I thought to myself, it's probably nothing. But deep down, I knew the signs were there. And no matter how much I wanted to deny it, that nagging feeling kept growing stronger. There was a voice in the back of my mind whispering, "You can't. Ignore this forever." And I didn't. It started slowly, like a small crack in something once flawless. At first, I didn't want to admit it to myself, but the signs were becoming harder to ignore. He was still the same in many ways. Still funny, still charming, still the guy I had fallen for. But there was a shift, an undeniable distance that began to creep in between us. It wasn't overt at first. It wasn't like he suddenly became someone else overnight, but little things, almost imperceptible things, began to add up. He started staying later at work, claiming he had deadlines to meet. He would tell me he had to go to meetings or that a project needed extra attention. At first, I accepted it. He was ambitious, after all. But then it became more frequent. Late nights turned into even later nights. And when he wasn't working, he was on his phone constantly. His focus seemed to be elsewhere, as if he was mentally miles away even when we were physically in the same room. I tried not to make a big deal out of it. After all, we all have our busy moments, right? But then there were the unexplainable absences. He'd disappear for hours, and when I'd ask where he'd been, he'd just shrug it off with a vague answer. "Oh, I was just out with some friends," or "I was getting some errands done." Nothing that raised any major red flags, but enough to make me wonder. His attention, once so devoted, was no longer fully mine. His conversations with me felt rushed, distracted, like he wasn't really present. He'd promised to call or message, but more often than not, the messages came late, or sometimes not at all. The familiar rhythm of our relationship seemed to be slipping away, replaced by these subtle absences like threads of trust slowly unraveling. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Maybe he was just stressed or preoccupied with something I didn't know about. But every time I looked into his eyes, I felt that nagging feeling again, the one I couldn't quite shake off, no matter how much I tried to push it aside. Have you ever had that nagging feeling? That something's just not right? It's not Something you can easily explain, but you know it's there, lingering in the back of your mind. And no matter how hard you try to ignore it, it keeps resurfacing, whispering in your ear. Pay attention. That's exactly how I felt. Like something was happening behind the scenes that I wasn't part of, and I had no choice but to confront it. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those rare moments when we were both home and had some time to ourselves. I was sitting on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, when I heard his phone buzz on the table next to me. It wasn't an unusual sound. He often left his phone lying around. But something made me pause. It was almost as if the universe had nudged me just for a second to take a closer look. I wasn't the kind of person to go through someone's personal things. I always believed in trust, and if there was ever a time I felt suspicious, I'd always just ask. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I picked up his phone, almost instinctively, as though my body had already made the decision for me. The screen lit up, revealing a message from a name I didn't recognize. It was a simple text, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. "Can't wait to see you tonight." My heart stopped. My hands trembled. I stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, none of them making any sense. Who was this person? Why was he texting him like that? My breath caught in my throat as I noticed another message from a few hours earlier. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to be with you again." I put the phone back down, my pulse racing, my mind whirling. I felt a sudden, overwhelming surge of disbelief. No, this couldn't be happening. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Was I overreacting? I asked myself. But deep down, I knew the answer. I knew this wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was real, and in that moment, the world seemed to tilt. Nothing felt real anymore. It was as if the ground beneath me had shifted, and everything I thought I knew was suddenly up in the air. The messages weren't just words on a screen. They were a betrayal. And no matter how much I tried to rationalize I knew what I was seeing. He had been lying to me. I felt like I was suffocating. The air around me felt thick, heavy, like I couldn't breathe. My body felt numb, and I almost wanted to throw up. How could he do this? How could he look me in the eye every day and still do something like this behind my back? The pain hit me all at once, sharp and intense. I couldn't hold back the tears. I kept staring at the messages, as if somehow hoping they would change, hoping it wasn't true. But the truth was staring me in the face, and it hurt more than I could have ever imagined. I kept asking myself, how did I not see it before? It all made sense now. All those little moments I had dismissed, all those small changes that I had rationalized away. They were all pieces of the puzzle, and now that I could see the full picture, it was almost too much to process. In that moment, the ground beneath me didn't just feel unstable, it felt like it had completely collapsed. It was like I was seeing the world through a veil of fog, and nothing was clear anymore. I had no idea how to move forward, how to make sense of the mess of emotions that were swirling inside me. My mind screamed for answers, but there was nothing that could explain what had just been revealed. It was as if everything I had known about this relationship had been shattered in an instant, leaving me standing in the wreckage, unable to pick up the pieces. And the hardest part was knowing that no matter how much I wished it wasn't true, I couldn't change the reality of it. The truth was there, undeniable, and I had no choice but to face it head-on. I had to confront him. There was no way around it. The truth was laid out before me in black and white, and I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen it. So, I waited. He came home that evening, looking the same as he always did, carefree, unaware of the storm that was brewing inside me. I had to take a deep breath to steady my nerves before I said anything. The words were stuck in my throat, but I knew I had to speak. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. He froze for a second, his eyes widening, as though he had been caught off guard. The smile he had been wearing faltered, and I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to come up with something, anything, that would explain away the situation. But he didn't say anything right away. I held up his phone. The messages were still there, impossible to deny. "Don't act like you don't know. I saw the texts. I saw everything." He blinked, then let out a nervous laugh. "What are you talking about? There's nothing going on. You're overreacting." My heart sank as he said it, but I couldn't let it go. Overreacting? I wasn't overreacting. I had proof. Clear, irrefutable proof. And yet, here he was, denying it. "I'm not overreacting," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "You can't just lie to me like this. These texts don't lie." He shook his head, his face twisting in disbelief. "You're making something out of nothing. They're just friends. You're reading too much into it." The words hit me like a slap in the face. "Friends?" I repeated, the anger creeping into my tone. "You're telling me these are just friends? You think I'm stupid?" He looked at me with a mix of annoyance and confusion. "I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm saying you've misunderstood everything. You've got it all wrong." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How was this possible? How could he stand there, looking me in the eye and say such blatant lies? The more he spoke, the more it felt like I was being gaslit. It wasn't about the facts anymore. It was about him turning everything upside down, making me question my own reality. Why do people deny things when you have proof right in front of them? I thought, unable to stop the question from echoing in my mind. It didn't make sense. Why was he denying what was so obvious? Was he really that good at manipulating the situation? Or was I just so blinded by love that I couldn't see the truth? As I stood there listening to him speak, I felt the heat rising in my chest. Anger, frustration, betrayal. It was all bubbling up inside me, but I couldn't do anything. I was frozen, caught in this surreal moment where the truth was right there, but I couldn't make him accept it. I had nothing to do but watch him twist the narrative until the very words coming out of his mouth sounded almost convincing. But deep down, I knew. I knew the truth. And yet, as he denied it over and over, it felt like I was losing my voice. Like my reality was slipping away with each word he spoke. It felt as though he was robbing me of my power to speak the truth, to stand up for myself. How could someone you loved so deeply reduce your reality to nothing more than a misunderstanding? How could he make you feel like you were crazy for trusting your own instincts? I could feel the anger burning inside me, threatening to explode. But I held it back, afraid that if I lost control, I'd lose myself too. I had to stay composed. I had to make him see. But I also knew that this wasn't about convincing him. It was about my own clarity. He continued to deny it, but each denial felt emptier than the last, like he was trying to sell me a lie that I couldn't buy. My hands shook as I held up his phone again, and in that moment, the frustration became overwhelming. "How long were you planning on lying to me, huh? How long did you think I wouldn't find out?" I said, my voice sharp with the sting of betrayal. There was a pause, a long silence between us. He didn't know what to say, and I didn't know how to respond. Except for one thing. I couldn't keep living in this lie. I couldn't allow him to erase my truth, my reality, with his words anymore. As I stood there looking at him, this person I once trusted with everything, I felt an unfamiliar weight settle in my chest. I wasn't just angry at him. I was angry at myself for letting it get this far, for allowing the doubts to fester and letting his denials chip away at my confidence. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about the loss of my voice, the loss of my sense of self in a relationship that, at one point, felt like everything. As the confrontation ended, I was left standing in the midst of my own confusion. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with words unsaid and emotions left to simmer. The truth was out there, but somehow it didn't feel like the truth anymore. He had denied everything, and for a moment I almost wanted to believe him. Maybe I was overreacting, I thought. Maybe I was just seeing things that weren't really there. His words, though laced with deceit, sounded so convincing. His assurances that everything was fine, that I was imagining things, were so easy to believe when I was tired and desperate for reassurance. Maybe I'm misreading everything. The thought crept in slowly, like a shadow I couldn't shake off. Could I have gotten it all wrong? I had trusted him. I had believed in this relationship so completely, so fully, that it was hard to imagine it unraveling like this. Could I have been mistaken? Could I have missed something along the way? For days, I replayed everything in my mind, the messages, the lies, the subtle shifts in his behavior. I questioned every little detail, trying to piece it together in a way that would make sense. And yet, nothing seemed to fit. The more I thought about it, the more I second-guessed myself. Maybe I had been paranoid. Maybe I had blown everything out of proportion. What if I'm just overreacting? I kept asking myself. What if I'm seeing something that isn't even there? I hated feeling this way. I hated how vulnerable I had become in the face of my own doubts. The more I reflected on it, the more it felt like I was losing myself in this whirlwind of confusion. I wanted to trust my instincts. But what if my instincts were wrong? What if everything I had built, everything I had believed in, was just a fragile illusion? Have you ever been so sure of something, but still had doubts eating at you? The kind of doubts that make you question your very perception of reality. It's like your mind and heart are at war, and no matter how much you try to silence the whispers, they keep growing louder, demanding to be heard. I kept thinking back to the good moments, the laughter, the late-night talks, the sense of closeness we once had. Was it all a lie? Was I just naive, clinging to a version of the relationship that wasn't even real? Maybe I had been too trusting. Maybe I had ignored the small signs, the quiet alarms going off in my head. And now, everything felt broken. But no matter how much I doubted myself, one thing remained clear. The truth had been right in front of me all along. It was hard to face, hard to accept, but I couldn't deny it. Yet, even knowing that, I still felt this gnawing uncertainty, this tug of emotional conflict inside me. I couldn't help but wonder if I had missed something small that could have changed everything. Maybe it was my fault for not asking the right questions sooner. Maybe if I had listened to my gut, I would have seen it coming. But now, all I had was a sinking feeling in my chest and the weight of my own doubt, pulling me under. I tried to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts had been right all along. But the self-doubt was relentless, and it was hard to ignore. Every time I thought I had a handle on the situation, my mind would slip back into questioning. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing control of my own thoughts. It felt like I was caught in a loop, constantly second-guessing everything I had known, every choice I had made. And as much as I tried to convince myself that I wasn't crazy, the fear that I was began to creep in, ever so quietly, like a storm on the horizon. As the days passed, something within me began to shift. At first, I had been desperate for answers, clinging to any excuse, any explanation, that would allow me to keep believing in the relationship. I wanted to hear him say it wasn't true, that he hadn't betrayed me, that everything I had seen and felt had been a misunderstanding. But the more I tried to seek validation from him, the more I realized that it wasn't his words that I needed. It wasn't his apology that would heal me. The truth, no matter how much I fought against it, had already settled into my bones. It had seeped into every corner of my heart, leaving no space untouched by its cold reality. There was no longer a need to question or search for answers. The truth didn't need to be spoken when you already know it. It was like a heavy weight pressing down on me, and while it hurt beyond measure, it also brought a strange sense of clarity. I could no longer deny the pain that the betrayal had caused. It wasn't just about the lies. It wasn't just about the other person. It was the realization that everything I had believed in, everything I had invested my heart into, had been a lie. The trust, the love, the connection, they had all been built on something fragile, something I couldn't have seen until it was too late. I kept replaying the moments before the discovery, the times when I had questioned his behavior but pushed those thoughts away. The late nights, the missed calls, the vague explanations. I remembered feeling like something wasn't right but silencing myself because I didn't want to seem paranoid. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have trusted myself, but I didn't. And now the truth was here, raw and unrelenting, and I had no choice but to face it. And it hurt. It hurt in a way I couldn't describe, like someone had ripped apart a part of me that I never thought I'd lose. The trust I had given so freely, the faith I had in this person, was shattered in an instant. All the love I had invested felt like it had been thrown back at me, discarded and meaningless. The pain wasn't just about what he had done, it was about how I had allowed myself to be blinded by the idea of him, by the version of him that I had wanted to believe in. It was strange, almost surreal, how quickly everything changed. How one moment, I had been holding on to the belief that everything was fine, and in the next, I was drowning in the weight of the truth. I wanted to scream, to rage against it, but all I could do was sit in the silence of it. I could feel the bitterness creeping in, but it didn't come with anger. It came with sorrow. A quiet, overwhelming sorrow for the way things had turned out. Why did I ignore the signs? I asked myself over and over again. Why didn't I see it coming? The self-blame was suffocating, but at the same time, I knew that blaming myself wouldn't change anything. The truth had already taken root, and I had no choice but to accept. It painful as it was, acceptance wasn't something that came easily. It wasn't a single moment of clarity. It was a slow, painful realization that I couldn't keep living in a lie. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. The hurt was too deep, too real. And as much as I wanted to deny it, the only way to move forward was to accept that this was my reality now. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about fixing what had been broken. It was about acknowledging that sometimes things don't work out the way we hope, no matter how much we want them to. And sometimes the only thing we can do is accept the harsh truth and begin to rebuild. In that moment, as the weight of the truth pressed down on me, I understood something important. It wasn't about what he had done. It was about what I was going to do next. What I would choose for myself now that I had been shown the truth, painful and ugly as it was. The truth didn't need to be spoken to be understood. I had already known it all along. And now, I had to face it, not with anger or regret, but with the quiet strength that comes from knowing what's real. The decision didn't come easily. In fact, it was the hardest thing I had ever had to do. But once I accepted the truth, something inside me clicked. I knew deep down that I couldn't keep living in a situation that had become toxic. The betrayal was like a wound that wouldn't heal, no matter how many times I tried to stitch it up with empty promises and half-truths. It wasn't about the love I still had for him. I did love him, or at least I had loved the person I thought he was. But love, as I was beginning to realize, wasn't enough when trust had been broken so completely. I could no longer ignore the pain or the way I had been made to feel invisible. In this relationship, the person I had trusted the most had betrayed me, and as much as it hurt, I knew that I had to move on. I remember sitting in the quiet of my room one night, looking at the empty space where his things once were. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that I wasn't afraid of being alone. I had spent so much time convincing myself that I needed him, that I couldn't live without him, that I had lost sight of who I was before him. But the truth was, I had always been enough. And now, it was time to choose myself again. Letting go isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing yourself again. It's about reclaiming your own worth, your own happiness, and realizing that you don't have to hold on to something that no longer serves you. For so long, I had held on, thinking that if I just tried hard enough, things would go back to how they used to be. But they wouldn't. They couldn't. Because what had been broken could never truly be fixed. There was a strange sense of relief in making that decision. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my chest. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew that moving on would take time, but I could no longer allow myself to be stuck in a place that only reminded me of betrayal. I deserved more than that. I deserved a love that was real, that was whole, and most importantly, I deserved to love myself enough to let go of something that wasn't right for me. The strength it took to let go wasn't something I realized I had until that moment. It wasn't just the strength to walk away. It was the strength to confront the truth, to accept it, and to say goodbye to the illusion of what I thought I had. It was the strength to trust that I would be okay, even if I didn't have all the answers right away. It wasn't about being angry anymore. It wasn't about getting revenge or making him regret his actions. It was about self-respect. It was about honoring my own worth and recognizing that I didn't have to stay in a place that didn't value me. The decision to leave wasn't just a choice to end a relationship. It was a choice to stop sacrificing myself. To stop sacrificing my peace, my happiness, and my future. I wasn't going to let someone else's mistakes define me. I wasn't going to stay in a relationship where I had to question my own value. I had to remember who I was before I ever met him, before his lies clouded my vision, and so I made the decision to move on. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary, and with every step away from him, I began to feel a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in months. I realized, in that moment, that the hardest part wasn't walking away. It was trusting that I could find my way back to myself. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but I knew one thing for sure. I would be okay. I would heal. And one day I would look back on this, not with regret, but with the knowledge that I had chosen myself. And that was worth everything. It's funny how life has a way of teaching us lessons we never expect. I used to think that strength came from the things we could control, the people we could trust, the relationships we could build, and the lives we could create. But now, I know that true strength comes from within. It comes from how we rise after we've been knocked down, how we find the courage to face the hardest truths, and how we learn to trust ourselves when everything else seems uncertain. This experience, as painful as it was, changed me. It stripped away the parts of myself that had been tied to someone else's approval, someone else's actions, and forced me to look inward. And what I found there surprised me. There was a resilience, a determination to heal, and a deeper understanding of who I was and what I truly needed from life. Isn't it funny how some of the hardest things to face can teach us the most about ourselves? I had spent so much time living for someone else, trying to make things work, trying to keep the peace, that I lost sight of my own value. But through this process of letting go, I rediscovered my worth. I learned that I didn't need someone else to define me, that I was enough on my own, and that I deserved a love that was healthy, honest, and true. The pain still lingers sometimes, as all wounds do. But it's different now. It doesn't define me. What defines me now is the strength I found when I decided to walk away. What defines me is the love I have for myself, the boundaries I've set, and the trust I now place in my own instincts. I've learned to trust myself more than ever before. Before, I would have second-guessed every decision, doubting whether I was making the right choice. But now, I trust the voice inside me, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable. That's what this experience taught me. The importance of trusting my own judgment, my own feelings, and my own strength. And emotionally, I've grown. I'm not the same person I was before this happened. I'm more aware of what I deserve and what I won't tolerate. I know now that healing takes time, and that's okay. I've learned that growth isn't always a straight path. It's messy. It's painful, but it's also beautiful in its own way. So, while I may have walked through fire, I came out on the other side stronger. And that, more than anything, is what I carry with me now. The person I've become through this experience is someone I can be proud of. I've learned that even in the face of betrayal, we have the power to rise and rebuild, stronger than before. As I look back on everything that has happened, I realize that the hardest part of this journey wasn't discovering the truth. It wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was what came after. It was about facing the harsh reality and deciding what to do with it. Because sometimes, knowing the truth isn't the hardest part. It's what you do with it that counts. We all face moments in life where we're tested, where the truth comes to light in ways that shake us to our core. And while the truth may hurt, it's how we respond to it that defines us. It's about finding the courage to move forward, to rebuild, and to choose ourselves. It's about trusting our instincts, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. The moment you start trusting yourself again is the moment you reclaim your power. This experience has taught me so much about the importance of self-empowerment. I've learned that no one can take away your worth unless you let them. And while it may feel like you've lost something precious, what you gain in the process is far more valuable. It's the ability to walk away from what no longer serves you, to trust yourself to heal, and to believe that better things lie ahead. So, to anyone who has gone through something similar, I want to say this. Trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, listen to that inner voice. Don't ignore the signs. Don't settle for less than you deserve. And most importantly, remember that you are worthy of love, respect, and honesty. You are deserving of peace, and that starts with you, choosing yourself every single day. I've learned that we are stronger than we often give ourselves credit for. The road to healing isn't always easy, and it won't happen overnight, but it's worth it. And every step forward is a victory, no matter how small it may seem. So, take a moment to reflect on your own experiences. Think about the moments where you had to face uncomfortable truths. How did you respond? What did you learn about yourself in the process? The truth can be painful, yes, but it also has the power to set you free. And the best part is, you get to choose how to move forward. As I close this chapter, I feel a sense of peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because I know I made the right choice for myself. I trusted my instincts, and I chose to let go of what no longer served me. And that, I believe, is the true path to healing and self-discovery. So, wherever you are on your journey, know this: you are not alone. The truth, no matter how difficult it may seem, is a stepping stone to something greater. And I hope that, in time, you find the strength to trust yourself, to let go of what holds you back, and to move forward with a heart that knows its worth. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for reflecting with me. Remember, your story is your own, and only you have the power to write the next chapter.